Hey dudes and dudettes, it's me, E.H. Ivins, and this is another episode of The Radical Reset. Sorry for taking over, well, it's been about 10 days since I posted my last one. Sorry about that. We have another project, another channel we're about to launch. I'm not going to tell you anything else about it until it is ready to launch, but it has been preoccupying me as well as my writing duties, and you know, there's only 24 hours in a day. But having said all that, here I am, and I'm wearing orange today in celebration, strange word to use, in recognition of my past prison experience and today's central subject, which I'll get to in just a moment, which is prison reform from an anti-political point of view and from uniquely an inside point of view from a very unusual kind of inmate, given that I did not grow up in the inner city eating lead paint off walls and shooting myself with heroin. I managed to, burn myself down in a massive act of self-destruction, wound up in prison, saw the system for what it really was, and am currently writing a book that I have not yet released called 6 Jars of Peanut Butter. It's a prison memoir combined with the prescription of what I think should be done to reform prisons, which is, in short, what we're going to talk about today, just in a little short overview. Very, very different kind of plan. The kind of plan that will never happen, never ever happen in the government, times, and country that we live in. As you know, I've talked a little bit about secession, or really, I should say nullification. What I really see happening is, if you want me to tell you how I think this is going to evolve, is that the dollar is going to collapse, the country is going to divide along state lines culturally and I'm being very simplistic, in the middle of the panic that ensues, and certain states will start to wonder why they're paying Washington 80% of their revenue. So a state like, for example, Colorado, which just off the top of my head I would consider nearly a perfect anti-political state, given their pioneering views on recreational marijuana and almost everything else, and their very liberal social views combined with their generally conservative fiscal views. That's kind of what anti-politism would look like if you shot every politician. Now, I don't mean literally shoot them. That was metaphor. So anyway, and then one day the governor of some state says, we're going to declare an anti-political government. We nullify, as is our right in the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. We stop paying federal taxes, all the revenues go to the state, and we become effectively an anti-political free border state that is neutral and actually is run for the benefit of its people using the system that I espouse in, wow, this was a wandering long way to get to this, in A Radical Reset, the Manifesto of Antipolitism, available to you free to read in the Kindle Lending Library on Amazon, link below in all the other direct that goes on down there. Okay, let's get to the subject matter at hand, and before I get to prisons, just one brief thing. Two brief things. First of all, I'm sure right now you're staring at my hair going, what the fuck? Did you stick your finger into a plug in the wall? No, I paid $75 for this fucking haircut. I'm just looking at it in the monitor. In trying to update my look, I may have just gone to like my inner Einstein, and I don't know if this is working or not. Feel free to comment below. On one hand, it's, looks like I just woke up. I don't know. Fuck that. The other thing is, I was looking in the Wall Street Journal this morning, and I noticed that President Emmanuel Macron of France, recently threw the bullshit flag on American wokeism. I included the link below to the article so you can read it for yourself. But when the world feels like woke America is, anyway, just makes my point. Emmanuel Macron is no wild man by any stretch of the imagination, but even he can see bullshit when he, can throw the bullshit flag when he sees it. Okay, let's talk prison. And I'm looking at my notes below because this is an important subject, and I'm holding notes in my hand because unlike my usual, or my past, I told you, I'm never going to ramble on out into the nowhere land again. I'm going to keep to the script. And so when I look down, I'm literally looking at the script that I've set out for the show so that I can, obviously script in the sense of general outline, so you can kind of keep the best of both worlds. I surf off when it's interesting, I think, but I keep on track, and that way we get to the end of the show. Okay, let's go. Today, prison is nothing more than a system that rotates recidivists in and out while pretending to rehabilitate. Look, I was there for nearly 5 years. I can tell you that that's absolutely true. They come in, they go, it's just they say the recidivism rate's about 60% nationally. that means that recidivism is the fancy word for you get out one day and you go back in a very short time, later. Your prison career, it becomes basically most of the inmates that I met in prison. The way I would phrase it to you, were doing life on the installment plan. They would come in and go out and come in and go out, and this is how they basically plan to spend the rest of their lives. Plan being a very loose word. They have no planning at all. These are people that live absolutely in the moment, much like human amoeba that react to every stimulus just in the moment, for lots of cultural reasons that I discuss at length in A Radical Reset. Everything I'm talking about now is in A Radical Reset and will be discussed at even greater length, because I think that the fact that the United States incarcerates more of its population than any other nation in the world, free or dictatorship, is just a disgrace. And it starts, by the way, with drug laws. And that's the first thing, in the first step on my process to defeat recidivism and to make the prison system into something modern. This is going to cost money. Where are we going to get this money in a world where I and everybody else that has a brain in their head understands that we're printing up fiat currency that will be our downfall? How do we do this in an anti-political state where the state is not in control of the money supply, but has to fund the prison operation such as it might need to be, although with a much smaller population, because step one, to pay for this and to have a much smaller prison population, we must legalize all drugs. Now, I provided the link below to a past podcast I did on this subject, and I went into it at great length, along with breaking it down in A Radical Reset, the Manifesto of Antipolitism. So I'm not going to go into all the reasons to legalize drugs, except to say and to reiterate the one point that I often make, which is, don't believe the bullshit that only a third of the people in prison are there for drug crimes. They're almost all there for drug crimes, even the violent crimes, except for the hardwired ones, like the serial killers and the serial rapists and the serial pedophiles, that kind of thing that's psychological, that we're never going to, that's what we're going to have to deal with in a real prison system, okay? And that's what we should be dealing with in a real prison system. But everybody else, even the people that beat the shit out of each other and shoot at each other, are all doing it in connection with drug crime. And drug crime only takes place because of the black market in drugs, and the black market in drugs only exists because of the idiotic drug war that we lost from the day we started it. And if we cut it out tomorrow, we'd have more than enough funding to do everything I'm about to talk about and still refund 80% of your money back to you. And I've done the math, by the way. Now, I'm not going to go into individual numbers today because it's so fucking boring, but you can do your own math and we can discuss it more at length. And this is, if I did a podcast on math, it would be, one of those. So I'm not going to do it. But anyway, do your own math, or trust me, take your pick. I know I'm in orange, okay? But I'm not really an orange. I got over that years ago. All right, back to what we're doing. Step one, legalize all drugs. That pays for it. Number two, segregate inmates initially based upon age and violence of the crime that he or she was convicted of. Certified psychopaths, serial killers, serial rapists, pedophiles. I'm reading from my list. The worst of the worst, with the life and the death sentences, which, by the way, I do not believe in the death penalty, but let the community decide. I used to believe in it, but frankly, after being in prison, these guys don't care if they die anyway, especially the psychopaths. So really, the better punishment is lock them up for life with no hope for parole, to be perfectly honest. And then, if the DNA comes up later that proves that they were actually innocent, they can still get out and we didn't kill them. And it eliminates the possible charge that we're killing more people of one kind than another, which, as you know, as an anti-politist, I don't care what your genitals or your pigment looks like, but the world seems to, so let's move on. Okay, now, so we segregate all those guys. Now we're left with the rest of the prison population. There's nothing to be done with a psychopath, guys. There's nothing. There's no such thing as rehabilitating a psychopath. If you're, that kind of little butterfly that thinks you can, rehabilitate a pedophile, you have never been around real pedophiles. I am the victim of incest. I know what a pedophile looks like. They do not rehabilitate. They do not get better. If you put them in the general prison population, they will be murdered by a lot of guys who are also the victims of pedophiles. Don't kid yourself. This is the dark underbelly of our culture, which I'm not going to go into in any depth today. Just say these guys need to be shoved off into life without parole. A pedophile, a serial rapist, a serial killer, they're all the same goddamn thing. They're killing people. Leaving behind a living carcass doesn't mean you didn't kill the person inside by virtue of the act that you committed, you low-life piece of shit, and these people go away forever. Now, for the rest of the prison population, the 95% of the sociopaths, people who commit crimes in prison, okay, or they land them in prison most of the time. They develop this. It's more, people are confusing narcissism with sociopathy. The reason that they look out for themselves first before anyone else without any seeming guilt is when you're raised literally on the street without parents, as is the case 99% of these guys, and I know I'm throwing around numbers casually, but you know what? They're not as casual as you think. Look them up. Almost everybody that ends up in the prison system, male or female, comes there from a single parent, loosely translated family, many times no parent effectively, who raised themselves with no ideas. This is why they gravitate towards gangs and organized crime. It replaces the family that they don't think they have, and here they are in prison. So now, but they're not hopeless. Okay, there's a chance to bring them back. They've just never had a track to run on. And the system as it's set up now is fucking insane. So here's the new systems. Okay, so we've gotten out the crazies. Now, the first phase of prison for everybody else is Marine basic training. Okay, now I'm not fucking around. I mean literally 10 weeks of Marine basic training run by a former hired in their retirement, like Arlie Ermy in Full Metal Jacket, Marine drill instructors. Where we now, of course, the old guys that go in, you know, I couldn't do at 63 years old Marine basic training. So we have some kind of scaled down allowance for those, you know, like, for example, I'm 63 years old, but I have no significant health issues. So I could do a reduced physical training program. I just couldn't do one of a 23-year-old kid. But, you know, in a much smaller prison population, with adequate funding, because we're not paying for a stupid drug war, we'll be able to do that. But basically, so let's just concede to me today, these are all basic concepts, and then we can knock down, you know, in some future world, the knockdown details. You're going to love this. So we put them into basic training. This is phase one, and everyone that completes basic training successfully moves to phase two, and everyone that doesn't complete basic training successfully starts over and does it again and again and again. And let me tell you, there is nothing in the world that will straighten out a wayward kid like a Marine drill instructor. And if we can't find enough Marines, then we'll bring in the guys from the Army. But you know what? I don't give a shit where a drill instructor comes from. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, they all know how to keep these guys in line and how to break them down. We're going to take the military structure here. And in addition to me being an inmate, by the way, I am also an honorably discharged U.S. Navy veteran who worked with a lot of Marines because I was in naval intelligence. And no, that is not an oxymoron. So I come from both areas, and I'm telling you, there is nothing that shapes a young mind better, male or female, than basic training. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put these guys in the big, and if you had been in prison with me, you'd know that's all they do is work out anyway. Okay, basically, they spend all their open time when they're not in their bullshit make-believe classes that teach them nothing. They're out in whatever area of exercise that any particular prison has, working out constantly. So we're going to do it in a very organized and disciplined way through 10 weeks of Marine basic training. Now, when that is done with the Marine basic training, the graduates go on, the rest stay back and keep doing until they do. Now, next phase. From this stage, and I'm reading this, guys, because I don't want to miss an important part of the point, so forgive my looking down. From this stage of his or her sentence onward, each inmate is judged individually. Group punishment is banned forever as it is used regularly today. Let me stop here just for a minute. Now, I wrote this into the description of this podcast, so you don't have to take notes on this. This is all written down for you, but listen to me carefully on this expansion on the subject. Today in prison, when someone on a prison yard, so for example, I was in 2 different prisons for the majority of the time I was inside, Yuma and Kingman, Arizona. Both were about 1,800 men on the yard. The yard is the entire, the prison complex that I was staying on. In Yuma, it was called La Paz. I was trying to remember the name. La Paz, which is the peace, which there was no peace on that fucking yard. La Paz yard. And up in Kingman, I was on Surbat yard, which was named after a nearby mountain range, if you're trying to figure out what the fuck is a Surbat. I tried to figure that out too. It's the name of the mountains nearby. Anyway, on those 1,800 men, if one guy fucked up on that yard, the whole yard was punished. If one guy started a fight, the whole yard was locked down. If one guy was caught with drugs, the whole yard was locked down. If one guy was caught making hooch, the whole yard was locked down. If if 2 guys had a fight, the whole yard is locked down. Punishing, and this is very routine in prison, punishing everybody for if someone stole something from the kitchen, the whole yard was locked down. I mean, it made it so that what's the point in trying? There was no possibility of advancing, and there was no possibility of getting any kind of favor for doing your job right. You were going to be punished with everybody else, treated the same way, strip searched the same way, hassled the same way, punished the same way, in exactly the same punishment as everybody else when somebody else did it. It's unbelievably stupid. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that practice, and instead, from that stage onward, we're going to break their sentence into 6-month successive periods. And I broke it down that low because some guys are in for 1 year for their third drunk driving offense, and some guys are in for 10 years. So I broke it into 6-month increments to make it realistic for the short-term sentence and the long-term sentence to get some value from the system. So they all go through basic training. They get into these 6-month phases. Now, as each phase goes, and as they complete each one, with hopefully no violations of prison rules and participating in everything and working, and we'll get to work in just 1 minute, okay, they move up. And as they move up, okay, without a demerit or violation, privileges are earned, including private room, better clothes, and variety of clothes. In other words, I'm wearing orange, which is all you have in prison, but it would be nice to have a blue or a black, and that would be fine for guys that earn it. Let them earn a little more variety in clothes, better food, maybe a better chow hall, a better line, individual. There's all kinds of ways of dealing with it. Enhanced visitation and work release. Not all at once. They earn these every 6 months. This you earn this, and this you earn that, and it's set up on but basically rewarding individual success. And when someone's punished, it has nothing to do with you. As long as you keep doing your thing, you don't have to worry what some other schmuck did. And it takes away that I can't win under any circumstance. It introduces a little of real life. Real life. If a guy down, in the other end of your apartment complex, God forbid, rob somebody, he gets arrested. You don't, even though you live in the same apartment. What is it? It's just a crazy lives in your apartment complex, right? So anyway, I've made my point. The ultimate level of reward, and these are for guys that have really, these 6-month things, some guys are going to be in such a short time it won't matter, but for the long-term guys, this means everything, is weekend family release combined with work release. Okay, so in other words, he goes home for the weekend and just spends 5 days a week in prison and 2 days, and this is even a guy who is serving a 25-year sentence. If he or she, when I say guy, by the way, from this point forward, I'm going to stick with guy, but everyone's going to understand now, I mean male, female, and anything else you define yourself as personally. Now, having said that, as you move forward, to get to that level, you got to really, have earned it up and made part of the scale. But you see where I go with this. Reward an individual for becoming a real person, a real man or woman, a real participant in the community and playing the game the right way, and don't punish him because some other schmuck fucked up. Okay, now let's get to the work part. One of the problems I saw in prison is that after guys would serve their sentence, they'd be literally thrown. It was funny, when I went into prison and I heard the term on the street, at first I thought it was a metaphor meaning being back home, but it's not. These guys mean literally on the street. And when the vast majority of guys get out of particularly state prison, they're literally tossed into some shithole part of whatever town you live in with no money at all, because prison jobs pay slave wages, literally slave wages. Typically 10 cents to 55 cents an hour, most of which these guys spend on the 3 prison basics, which is tobacco, chew, and coffee. Okay, I mean, when I say tobacco, smoking tobacco, chew tobacco, and coffee. Those are the 3 major food groups to an inmate. They have no money left when they hit the street. They hit this, and the state debits the money that they get up to $250, but most of them never even get out with the $250. They get out with a tiny fraction of that, and they go right back to what they were doing, and then back into recidivism, completely unprepared for what they face. So instead, this is my answer to this. Prison industries should be private partnerships with employers to train and employ inmates at 50% of the prevailing wage for identical work on the outside. Remember, inmates won't have to pay for rent or food, so their pay can be reduced to incentivize private employers to participate, while still allowing them to build a nest egg for release. All pay is kept by the inmate. 80% of it goes into a 401k type savings account where inmates can direct their own investments and learn the markets. 20% will be available to them immediately to be used for prison purchases like snacks, personal and convenience items, etc. Okay, let me put this all into English. Let's say that there's a job out there that a prison industry is, the incentive for a private company to come work in the prison so they can pay 50% of prevailing wage, because they're not going to have to pay rent and food. Take a look at your own budget. How much, half your budget at least, is going towards your rent or mortgage and your food. So an inmate doesn't have to pay that, so it is fair not to pay them because that would be like paying them twice a private employee's net wages, and that's not fair. I hate that word fairness, but it really isn't. Let's just be honest about it. So instead, what we're talking about is we're going to pay the inmates 50% of prevailing wage. So if it's let me use a real employer that I've seen in the prison industry. A guy there was a company up in Kingman manufacturing trailers. Okay, when I say trailers, the kind pulled behind commercial vehicles that carry, small commercial loads. You know what I'm talking about, open trailers. Anyway, evidently there's a big market for this. They built a lot of them. And in the real world, the guys make about $20 an hour. Well, the prison guys then, therefore, would make $10 an hour. Okay, but out of that $10 an hour, and they're working full 8-hour days, so they're making $80 a day. Of that $80 a day, $64 of it, 80% of it, is going into basically a 401k or some, we can call it whatever we want, the prison savings account, where they can direct their own investments between stocks and bonds and cash and all kinds of different things. And then we can bring in investment advisors from the outside to teach inmates. And when I'm talking about registered, licensed guys who aren't making any commission on these purchases, just an informative course on how to allocate your money properly and teach them some life skills and budgeting, since they know that 80% of their money is going into this account and they save it and they're going to get 20%, so they know they're going to get X number of dollars for the inmate store every week. And believe it or not, that's plenty of money for all that other kind of shit during the week when you don't have rent or any food to pay for. So they can buy their cigarettes and their coffee and all that kind of stuff and live happily ever after, right? Okay, and life is happy. And now they're going to get out of prison. I mean, think about it. If you were saving $64 a day and you were saving it 5 days a week, and you were saving it for 10 years at interest and growth in accounts that you allocated, you could get out of prison with a lot of money that you earned legitimately and not go back to prison because you can buy a fucking house or a decent car or both or a condo or whatever the fuck, or a trailer or whatever it is. It's going to be a lot of variance in this on how long they're in and how much they've saved, but they're not going to hit the streets penniless, and they're going to learn real job skills from real employers that have an incentive to do it, and the state is going to stop treating them like fucking slaves, and they're going to have a chance. They'd have no chance without money, but we don't want to give them taxpayer money. Let's give them private industry money and incentivize the private industries by giving them the break on the payment. It's a win-win-win. Nobody loses on this. These are guys, again, we're not talking about the psychos. They're off there serving their life without parole, breaking rocks as far as I'm concerned. I don't give a shit if they're whipped by Roman gladiators. Really. That was a fucking weird analogy. Anyway. All right. Step 6. Inmates who maintain a perfect record throughout their incarceration will receive early release, okay, up to 50% reduction for violent crimes and a 75% reduction for non-violent crimes. Look, you catch a guy shoplifting and you put him through this program and he's gotten a 5-year sentence. He doesn't need to serve 5 years. When he's got his act together, get him the fuck back on the street with his family. What the fuck? Okay, we're incarcerated. And by the way, this also lends itself, and I didn't really speak to this in the notes, but I want to say this, there should be no mandatory sentencing. Look, the vast majority of judges, even today in the current system, before we even clean it up, are good people who know what the fuck they're doing and who are politically impartial and are going to make good judgments and can listen to the evidence. And the problem is, when you hear about crazy sentences by judges, you're hearing about a very isolated instance. Most judges, male, female, black, white, any community in the country, can listen to the evidence and impose an appropriate sentence based upon their life experience and their reading of the defendant. Okay, it's as simple as that, and what chance they have through this now rehabilitative system and what chance there is for success, and to weigh all the factors. It's going to change the judge's perspective. They're going to be putting people into a system where the people are going to get a second chance. So a judge might impose, he gets an 18-year-old kid that's really messed up, but has a chance to be something. The judge sees promise, maybe a little longer sentence in this system where there's a way for them to come out with a skill and money and to recharge their life and a track, and being basically a quasi-marine might be a good idea. The point is, let the judge decide. Let's turn our prisons into factories of positive change instead of hopeless pits of despair and loss. And that is the end of my broadcast, podcast, YouTube channel, video, call it what you want, today. Now, before we go, make sure, if you haven't done so already, that you subscribe to our little podcast of Antipolitics. Make sure you read the book, the Antipolitics Manifesto, A Radical Reset. Make sure you share this podcast with your friends. Make sure you sign up for notifications. Make sure you contact me at the number above if you want to get involved. And that's it for today. I hope you guys have had a fun time. I have. And until next time, this is E.H. Ivins signing off.